lucky and fortunate to have an underrepresented minority as a mentor in my undergrad career. So I went to UC San Diego, where I met a postdoc who was African American, and she mentored me for most of my research life at UCSD. I stayed in her lab for the whole time, and she really encouraged me and even showed me that PhD was an option for me. I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't even know about applying to grad school. And actually the research I did with her, I didn't like, but I liked her so much as a mentor, and the lab was great. So I stayed there full time, but I did enzymology and plant science, and more evolutionary biology. And people that have met me here, I now do cancer research. So I took a whole different direction for my PhD. But I would largely credit her to why I continued in science.
For me, actually, I don't even think Irma knows this. When I started to get into science, I was actually really interested in agricultural science. And then, so in environmental science, and I did undergrad at Syracuse University. And it was there that, similar to what Irma just said, I had a faculty mentor. She actually taught the biochemistry class. And then I ended up doing work in her lab, and she's the one who convinced me to do molecular biology and biochemistry research and pursue that career instead. And also was very supportive in terms of encouraging me to go to graduate school. I didn't even know how you would even go to graduate school. I didn't even know that was an option, or what the trajectory was. So definitely owe a lot of thanks to her as a faculty mentor. And she also helped to really bridge these gaps between different disciplines. She was very big on taking an interdisciplinary approach. So not just relying on one specific avenue or one specific discipline of science, but really looking at all the literature that's involved, even if it's outside of your field, because it can really impact your project and make it, much better than if you just stuck to one small thing. So I think that helped me here coming in, and then joining Shibing Chin's lab. So I'm also in the 5th year in the BBS program. I actually met Irma though through Dr. Weiss's lab rotation. So I'm very thankful that I rotated with him, not only for the experience and then getting to have Bob as a mentor too, but then also to be able to meet Irma, who's been my closest friend throughout my graduate school here.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we will.
But yes, I agree. Totally
so
with that.
Anyways, science builds on a lot of connections and communication, and I think that this particular partnership has been very strong in fostering that, especially among its students that are involved.
Terrific. Thank you. So who's going to start?
Okay, so I'll share the screen.
Starting. Yeah.
Okay, so on that same avenue, we did have a little bit of background to share before we start talking about the researchers that we chose, and we'll briefly do that. But today's talk focuses on a couple of LatinX researchers that were not really highlighted during their time. So we will be talking about what they accomplished. And before that, given that Bob had told Rob and I to do a little intro, I just included a couple or a slide on navigating graduate school as an underrepresented minority. So I just wanted to highlight, the purpose of this slide is just to highlight some of the different student orgs that I'm a part of here at Cornell, and the importance of that. And I mean, you guys all know that I also participate in Cancer Resource Center, but in addition to that, I'm very involved in promoting diversity at Cornell. I'm a member of several groups that do this same mission, really, and just approach it in different ways with different people. So for my specific department, I'm a member of the Diversity Council for MVG, which encompasses the biochemistry program. And that's why in this slide, I kind of know our faculty advisor, Dr. Chris Rami, who has been instrumental in even founding of this council. And then now we do a lot of outreach through this council. And then I just wanted to highlight also that Rob and I are both members of SACNAS, Cornell, which is the Society for Advancement Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. And this group has gotten really large, which is great to see. This picture next to the logo is Rob and I this summer doing like a little get together in the park once, you know, quarantine rules were lifted. So it is a really supportive community, and anyone is welcome to join if you're just interested in promoting diversity. And we have a large number of members now that are not technically LatinX, but are interested in doing scientific outreach and increasing diversity at Cornell. And I like to put that on here because I like to credit Rob as someone that may not be Latinx, but you know, is first gen and continues to promote the advocacy of getting people here from a diverse set of backgrounds, which is really the key to innovative science, I would say. So, and one thing new that we've been doing that Rob has gone viral on, in case people don't know, is like a scientific communication part. It was completely Rob's idea, so I'm going to let him present it. But another thing that we're working on is on translating this video into Spanish. And so Rob had an amazing idea of explaining how the COVID vaccine works. So I wanted to play it for you guys if you guys are interested.
Please.
I think you have to turn up the volume or something like that. Or can other people hear it?
No.
Yeah, I think you have to share the audio in addition to the screen.
Do you know how to do that, Annabella?
Oh, I do not. I've just heard people talk about it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we don't have to share it, but we can provide the link, how about, so people can listen to it on their own time.
Okay.
No, stop. Okay. But anyway, we've been doing this kind of research, and we'll have follow up with translating Rob's video into Spanish, hopefully, and to try to reach more people. But his video has been a large success on social media, and it's getting so many followers and retweets, and yeah, so look for it. But we'll provide the link after this. All right, so I'll let Rob speak.
Yes. Okay, so to kind of kickstart our talk, we wanted to give a little bit of information just about like URM students, just so everyone could be on the same page of where we're taking this talk. I wasn't here for the talk that happened, I think it was 2 months ago. So I'm not sure how much was covered, but here's just like a little quick brief overview. So really like understanding some of the challenges that these students face, especially when if some of the students don't have the representation or the appreciation they feel. There's a lot of this strong isolation feeling that has been picked up by several different studies, especially with increased over the past several years. And this can include racial minorities, women, impoverished individuals, people coming from first generation backgrounds, LGBTQ individuals, and immigrants, and other minorities as well. This study that was in 2017 found that even if there's one representative in higher education, and that underrepresented minority student it can significantly improve their self-perception. And I think Irma actually had a great example of that when she was giving her background story. Not that one should be enough, but just showing that one person can make a large difference. And this study was done with undergraduate students specifically. And then I wanted to show this little bit of data that was generated in 2015. It was actually funded by the National Science Foundation, looking at the completion rate of PhDs. They didn't have this information for any other groups other than Black or African Americans or Hispanic or Latino, but it just shows that less than 50% of the students coming into a PhD program in either of these two backgrounds actually complete their PhD within 7 years. There was also some data looking at 10-year completion, but the numbers didn't really change that much. So just showing that why is there this large difference of individuals who are not completing their PhD in these backgrounds, and how can we improve these numbers moving forward?
So Rob, what's the statistic for white completion rate within 7 years? And is this confined to particular sciences or sciences overall?
Yeah, so the data from this study, it was specifically looking only at underrepresented minorities. So it gave some statistics.
But don't you need to compare it to something? I mean, in my PhD program, I would be surprised if 50% of the white people made it through.
Well, I will just say that the study did not look at those individuals. It was specifically only looking at underrepresented minorities. So what they did was at the beginning of 7 years, they have a number. So if that number is 10, then 7 years later, they can look at the numbers. And if that number is 5, it's 50%. So that's how they had their comparison of making these statistics or these 50% numbers. But there was no data given looking at the actual a white individual and their completion rate. But yeah, definitely looking into that data would absolutely be important to include. And
do you feel that the field that you're in accepts poor completion rates? I mean, I have a feeling that mine did. Like, this was par for the course. It was the way it was. It wasn't seen as a problem, which I hope has changed.
So I can help, Rob. I mean, in my experience in my program, actually the completion rate is quite high.
I'm glad.
My specific cohort, I think there were about 3 students that did not complete out of 18. And unfortunately, out of those 3, 2 were minorities. So there was only 1 white person in my experience. But I think in general, I mean, maybe Bob can speak to this, given that he manages one of the graduate programs here. But I think in general, the completion rate is quite high as far as
I think you're right, Irma. And that's a priority at Cornell, I think, across the graduate school, that, we take students in with the expectation they're going to complete their degree and be successful in the program, and try to give them all the skills to do that. But, there is, I mean, one of the things we deal with is recruit a diverse population of students, but then also support those students while they're here to make sure everybody makes it through the program successfully.
Yeah, in my cohort 2 through BBS, we also had 3 students who are not here either anymore, but we only started out with 10. So, I mean, I guess that changes the percentage, but it's still a similar number of people as what Irma had talked about. And then Irma had shared this study with me that showed that if we actually look at the faculty underrepresented minorities that are present, so this kind of ties back to the information on the other slide, looking at that students would like to have, if students have this mentor, then they have better outcomes, at least at the undergraduate level. But if we look at the actual percentage of faculty, this is an older study in 2013. I couldn't find anything that was a bit more recent, but it showed that less than 10% of faculty actually are part of an underrepresented minority background at the assistant professor level, and then that number drops nearly in half if we look specifically only at tenured professors. This study was only done at four-year institutions, so I'm not sure how it spans across other colleges, but at least at the larger colleges, this data is alarming for how low these numbers are. And then when we look at the gender disparity here, mostly is made up of male professors at 78% and women professors just a little bit above 21%, rounding up to 22. And this was also part of that 2013 study. So these data might have changed moving forward, but still not at an equal level.
And then I kind of added this from a recent grant application that I had worked on. So these stats are actually from Cornell, and these are displayed publicly. So you can go on dashboard and examine it yourself if curious. But yeah, this is public data. And so Cornell likes to boast about their diversity at the undergraduate level. So at the undergraduate level, you see about 37% minorities making up the class, which is great. But once you go into analyzing it to the graduate student level, you get a severe drop. And this is across all colleges at Cornell. So if you look at just vet med does a little better. They have about a 20% URM or other minority population. And arts and sciences, as well as CALS or agriculture and life sciences.
This is Joan at Cornerstone Hospital. So I got your message about needing more medication for Lucy. However, I only
have about a 10% URM.
So I'm going to have you pick that up tomorrow if you'd like. If you'd like the 120,
I muted them. Oh, well.
Okay.
Yeah, so yes, so these again are just again current Cornell stats on the graduate student population. So I am probably one of those 8% in agriculture and life sciences and art sciences. And sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I wanted to ask, why do you think that might be? Why do you think that even though there's more why do you think the diversity doesn't translate over from the undergraduate into the graduate levels? Sorry again for interrupting, didn't mean to.
It's okay. I think, do I cover it? Oh, no, I don't cover it next. But yes, so I think there are a large number of reasons. I think that you need intervention at every level of education across your career trajectory. So in terms of undergrad to grad school, I think you can, I think it makes sense to hypothesize that the reason is that a lot of underrepresented minorities don't or have certain disadvantages that their peers may not. And especially for graduate school, when you think about science graduate school, you need a lot of research experience. So you need mentors, as we've discussed. You need a competitive application to get into these programs. And if you don't have these things, then you're probably not making it to that next level. And research, there's many articles that publish that minorities do not have access to as many of these resources during their undergrad career, or face other challenges. For example, how do you get a research position? Rob and I both discuss kind of a lucky trajectory into getting our first research mentors, right? And a lot of that involves cold emailing PIs. And so luckily I got matched with someone that happened to be a minority, but I didn't email any professors when I was an undergrad. I thought that was strange and I was intimidated by that. So I only applied to positions that were already available and I didn't get any. So for example, if that person hadn't given me that chance for that research experience, would I be here at Cornell now? So I think that these kind of things, what you need to get into graduate school, are not always accessible to URM people. Okay, and then another study that is pretty big right now is published in PNAS. And basically they study this diversity innovation paradox. So not only is this a problem from trajectory of undergrad to graduate school, but even when you already made it to graduate school, if you analyze PhD recipients and their dissertations, you can see that even though URM students may innovate at higher rates than majority students, their contributions can also be discounted and less likely to earn them academic positions. And I didn't include data, but if you are interested, you can read this article. It is very computation heavy as they follow people's dissertations, but that's the main finding. So even if you make it and you get a paper, you may not be getting the credit that you deserve as well. So moving forward, and this kind of touches on Annabella's question, what can we do? So this is like just what Rob and I were coming up with, but obviously there are many other things that you can do. But as Bob stated, in a graduate program, you want to recruit and retain, importantly, URM students at all levels. In terms of undergrad to research experience, that's another avenue that can be increased even at Cornell, right? Like there are programs out there that specifically serve these populations of students to do research experience. For example, like McNair, Mark, RISE, all of these programs are for research experience at the undergraduate level. And I think that Cornell does have some partnerships with these programs, but that can always be increased. Or, you know, just helping current undergrad students at Cornell from a URM background to get a research position and to get an idea of what research is here. And then you can also advocate for bringing speakers and increasing representation that way, and increasing, again, opportunity for networking options. So these are things that I work on in various of my student orgs and at SACNAS. And yeah, like just increasing access. So for one series we have is a faculty member will now come talk to our SACNAS Cornell chapter and just talk about their career trajectory and expose these students to engaging with faculty. So that's one example of a kind of low cost way of doing things. But yeah, these type of things, we just need to put more effort into solving this problem. So I guess I'll start off. So today we're gonna be discussing 2 Latinx women in STEM. I'm gonna talk about Dr. Sarah Stewart, who held many degrees, I wanna say. So she was a doctor, she got a PhD, and she started off with a master's in microbiology. And then I'll let Rob introduce his person.
And then I'll follow Irma and talk about Dr. Perez, who is a cancer researcher. She focuses her work on cell receptors and immuno-oncology, and also it will be important to highlight that she she takes her role both in academia and in industry. So that's interesting for any of the graduate students who are here today.
Okay, so I included a lot of text in my slides, but we don't have to discuss everything I said, and we can send out the slides if you're interested later. So, okay, so the person that I'm talking about is Dr. Sarah Stewart, who revealed the missing link between viruses and cancer. So, as we all know, there is an existing HPV vaccine. And it's otherwise known as Gardasil. This vaccine is 100% effective against human papillomavirus. And so if you're a teenager in US, I think it's pretty standard now to take this HPV vaccine. However, the idea of a cancer-causing virus was preposterous in those times when Sarah was working. So they knew that women were dying of cervical cancer, but researchers couldn't figure out what was causing it. And it was in 1976 that this virologist, Harold, I'm not going to try to pronounce the rest of the name, identified the human papillomaviruses, which, as we talked about, was one of the first known to lead to human cancer. From 1975 to 2014, deaths from cervical cancer dropped by 50% once this was discovered. And the vaccination, of course, led to much more efficacy. And so Dr. Sarah Stewart was Mexican-American. So she was born in the state of Jalisco. And this is, was kind of cool for me because, so I'm from Mexico as well. And I'm actually, my family is from pretty near where she was from. So this is kind of like middle of Mexico to lower Mexico. It's actually, if you guys are not familiar with the states in Mexico, Guadalajara is one of the largest airports, and that is the state where she's from. So she grew up there only childhood. So her father, George, was American and a mining engineer. So he had gold and silver mines in that region. And that's where he met her mother, who was Mexican, Maria. However, this was at the time when the Mexican Revolution was happening. And so she was forced to migrate, or her family was forced to migrate from Mexico to the US. And they decided to move to Oregon because her dad owned land there. And this was at the age of 5. So she was very young when she moved to US. And so she did high school in Oregon, and then they moved to New Mexico. And in New Mexico is where she decided to do college. So she went to New Mexico State University in Las Cruces. And at the time, though, women are not allowed to have any degree that they want. So she actually started off being a home economics major. And the reason for that was because she saw it as a way to get the general science background. So apparently at the time, that economics degree, or that home economics degree, would give you a lot of the same coursework as the general science degree. So that's what she decided to do. And I like this quote. I have a lot of quotes from her that are pretty sassy. So she said, "We took chemistry and all other courses along with everybody else." And so the girls took the very same courses the fellows did. So that's why she did that. And then in the end, when she graduated, she was able to attain both degrees. So the home economics degree that she had originally started with, and the general science degree, given the coursework. And so after graduation, again, like, women are not allowed to do research at this time, really, or it's not common. So she decided to just teach home economics at first in a small high school in New Mexico. But she soon got bored of that and decided to apply for many fellowships. And again, like, a quote of hers is that she just picked places random over the country to apply for a fellowship to continue her education. And eventually she got one of them to reply, and this was the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, where she was accepted to get a master's degree in microbiology. And she did that. So she did that and then took a bacteriologist position in Colorado during that time, where she mostly worked on nitrogen fixing bacteria. And kind of like in the same avenue as Rob, was interested in like the agriculture of that. So how will this lead to a better crop yield? But again, another quote from her, it was that she was in soil bacteriology, but she wasn't interested in it. And so she then pursues her PhD after this. And she began the doctoral work at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. However, again, she she jumps around a lot is what I noticed in doing research about her, seeming to always be interested in the NIH and cancer research. So she takes an unpaid position at the NIH as a research assistant, and she does that with Ida, who was the first woman scientist to work at the NIH. So she decides to do that. And her work focuses again on anaerobes, or organisms that survive without oxygen. So she's still doing a lot of the work that she didn't seem to be that interested in. And she makes discoveries in this field anyway, even though it's not her primary research interest. She finds, or she helps develop toxoids for gangrene treatment and immunization during World War II. And then she moves to the University of Chicago to finish her PhD while on assignment for the NIH. So again, she becomes disinterested in the toxoid research and decides that she wants to now do a medical degree because she wants to do cancer research. I couldn't find about the motivation behind why she thought there was a connection between viruses and cancer. It just means that I just found that for some reason, she just was really passionate about that link and thought that it could be possible and was always trying to do that work at NIH. So that's always what she said. She just said, my feelings have always been that certain cancers are virus induced. But initially she had no idea how controversial that idea would be. So she wrote a proposal for the NIH and the National Cancer Institute at this time, and they refused it. They said that she was not qualified to work on human research because she did not have the medical degree yet and had no experience in medical research, was only, basically they're saying she has not even worked on mammals, right? And that her proposal was dubious. And then she decided then, okay, well, if they're rejecting my proposal because I have no human research, then I need to go and do my medical degree, which she was thinking about anyway. The only problem here, though, is it's 1944 and women aren't allowed to enroll as full students in medical school. So she finds a way around that. She accepts a post at Georgetown University where she is going to be an instructor in bacteriology. And as an instructor, she gets to take the medical courses for free. But she's not considered a full student. She just takes these courses alongside with her instructor job. And then once 1947 hits, Georgetown changes their opinion on accepting women and policy, and she becomes formally enrolled. And in 1949, at the age of 43, she becomes the first woman to earn a Georgetown medical degree. Okay, and then she seeks human research experience. She does that by becoming a gynecologist in Staten Island, and eventually comes upon an opportunity to go back to NIH or NCI, or she wants to do that. However, the director of the time said that if she's ready to come back and do that, prove that cancer is caused by viruses, she's not going to be able to. Is there a question? Sorry. Okay. So still the premise of her research is not really agreed upon by NIH or NCI. But she does get appointed the medical director at NCI. And she finally has some professional leverage and resources to begin her work in earnest. So at this time, I just put a quote for Gregory Morgan, who is a historian. And he basically said that the reason people were so against cancer and virus link was because they thought that people that have cancer, if it's caused by virus, then you'd expect it to have similar patterns to to other infectious diseases. So because they don't see that someone had cancer and could transfer it to somebody else, they don't believe that there's any link here, which I thought was pretty, I mean, I understand that rationale for the time. However, I mean, it turns out that she was right in the end, right? So, so here she finally begins her search for a viral basis for cancer. However, at this time too, it's also not unprecedented. So the struggle that she's going through, I felt, was kind of, again, like in the similar discussions we had earlier about not being recognized for her scientific merit. Because there had been other people that were working on virus and transmitting cancer in other models. However, they were men, so I don't know if that was the reason. But these were just some examples of some current virologists or physicians looking at different virus and cancer links. So one of them was this biologist, John Bittner, who demonstrated that the mouse mammary tumor virus could be transmitted from a mother to her young through milk. And then the major one here that I will discuss after was Gross's work on leukemia in mice in the 1950s. And this would directly line up with when she makes her first discoveries. This was the first paper that I guess, I'm not really sure how it worked out between them, but they were published pretty back to back. So what Gross found, he was initially an immunologist, and he had been, again, he had also been struggling to gain respect for his research, given the virus cancer link, but he was able to work on it as well. So he discovered that the leukemia virus would later, if you ground it up in mouse organs and then put it back into mice, it also grew tumors. So Stewart and at the time now her colleague, Bernice Eddy, tried the same experiment that he had done. So, and instead of replicating his results, their mice grew tumors of a different kind. So, so they didn't get leukemias. They got tumors in the parotid gland. But the paper that you can see that was published doesn't really say caused by a virus, given the controversy that she had already experienced in her life. So she just says this vague title to try to avoid the same type of problems that she had had with the NIH before. So meaning like produced by a filterable agent instead of saying produced by virus. Okay, and then so she continues these work after this first seminal study, again, back to back with Gross, who published his own. And she starts isolating tumor extracts that she generates in tissue culture. And she and Eddy both find that these fluids harvested from the mouse embryo cultures had higher quantities of the tumor-inducing virus. So this is the direct proof that this cancer that she's studying is caused by a virus. And so in this paper, in this title of the slide, that was her paper. So neoplasms in mice inoculated with tumor agent carried in tissue culture. And it turns out that this virus that she identified caused around 20 other kinds of tumors, and not only the parotid tumors. And so she entitles this, or Eddy does, her colleague, as the polyoma virus, which literally means many tumors. And so, yeah, so Stewart, Eddy are now known to have been the founders of this polyoma virus and linking viruses and cancer to this. And
two college town streets too.
Right. Yeah. Okay, and then I like this quote too that I read in reading about her. Well, now that she discovers this, everyone is all into her research and her ideas. And they basically say that this virus cancer link was the hottest thing in cancer research at the time. Unfortunately, I don't think that Stewart lived through the incidence of the establishment of the HPV vaccine and all that she of course contributed to, but she at least did live to see that the virus cancer studies were getting more recognized and were more established, and people were excited about in that field. I have some quotes about, but we don't have to discuss this. But so in her last paper, she reports possible traces of virus in a human sarcoma. But after that, unfortunately, Stewart confronts cancer personally. So she was first diagnosed with ovarian cancer and then later with lung cancer. And the lung cancer ended her life, unfortunately. And Eddie, who became Stewart's obviously longtime friend and colleague, said that Stewart continued her research until she became too ill to work. And so now I just wanted to include that now the NCI spends about $4 million investigating the connection that Stewart found and had encouraged 20 years prior to her actual position at NCI. She proposed that a significant amount of time earlier and was just not allowed to do that research. And now NIH boasts a $70 million budget for cancer prevention, which includes research into viruses and cancer. So yeah, I thought it was she's a really inspiring story, and I personally hadn't heard of her, which is disappointing, but you know, and just to bring it back to my own research, I use polyoma middle T antigen in my current research. And so Stewart finding this link between viruses and cancer has led to many things that we currently use in the lab. And so I just wanted to stress that, and I know some of you have already been in my posters, but mouse models for any cancer are usually used, and mine uses a virus promoter to cause the mammary tumors that I study in cancer. So not specifically did she discover the mammary tumor virus promoter, but still, but without her cancer virus idea, I think that even the models would not be used. No problem. Any questions for Stewart that I could answer? No?
That was great. So, and maybe we'll have some questions later over both parts.
Sounds good.
Do you want to share on your own, or you want me to click for you?
You can click, I guess, it's fine. If you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's only a few slides, so. Okay, so next we're gonna talk about this other scientist called Edith Perez. I don't have as extensive of a background that I could find for her growing up as Irma had, but she grew up in Puerto Rico in a very rural neighborhood. It was a lower socioeconomic status, but she quotes that, you know, when she was younger and growing up, she was always very curious in school, always asking a lot of questions, and she thinks that that's what just made her be drawn to science since there's always so much to still figure out. She identifies as part of the LGBTQ community, and she then went to the University of Puerto Rico first for her bachelor's degree, and then she continued there also for her medical degree. She also highlights that as part of her training, not only the scientific knowledge was really important to her, but she also had the chance to travel and do some externships in Europe. And she said that this really helped her like, meet new people, get new ideas, collaborate, and just like transfer a lot of knowledge between individuals, which she thought was very strong and wanted to take with her in her future career. So that's kind of the second bullet point, is bridging a lot of knowledge from all parts of the world. So she decided to apply for some specialty positions across all across the United States. And she ended up, oh, you can go to the next slide, Irma. Sorry. She ended up taking her fellowship at University of California, Davis. So here is where she decided that she was going to do her fellowship double in hematology and in oncology. So studying blood and also cancer. She became certified in the American Internal Medicine. And then that's when she started to transition, rather than seeing patients, to actually doing research with her medical degree. So her first research was actually identifying different biomarkers that are in breast cancer cells. So she specifically had started out her research looking at triple negative breast cancer, and was trying to identify if there was unique biomarkers that were localized in certain parts of the cell. So like this little diagram down here shows, you know, a biomarker on a cancer cell on the outside, but she was interested in how can we identify, you know, different biomarkers that might even be in the nucleus or in the cytoplasm. She transitioned that work into focusing now on the HER2 positive or negative breast cancer. So she started to do some studies with, at the time, the HER2 positive breast cancer was starting to become, you know, it had been identified, so it was becoming more popular to study, and she began getting involved in clinical trials, trying to recruit women, trying to study different prognoses, how are we going to better understand whether drugs are working or not. So she kind of, throughout her fellowship, and then she additionally stayed there for 3 more years. So the fellowship, I believe, was 4. So she was there for 7 years. She learned a lot from the you know, molecular side of this research, all the way up to even the clinical trials of trying to design some drugs. And you can go to the next slide. And then I will go back and talk about her clinical, or what she had done with the HER2. But first, I want to just say what she's doing now. She, from the position at UC Davis, she then went to the Mayo Clinic, and she's been promoted several times, and she's now the director of breast cancer genomics program there. She then was also dual, not only doing that job at the Mayo Clinic, but she was also working at Genentech, and she was the head of the bio-oncology department. She was there for 3 years, and then that's where things kind of got a little bit interesting in terms of like her research, maybe not getting as much credit as it deserved through Genentech. So within, actually at the beginning of this year, right in January, she started working, she left Genentech, and then a few months later joined Bolt Therapeutics as their chief medical officer. Again, still working at Mayo Clinic and doing this part in industry. So she's really trying to do both the teaching aspect and then also the clinical aspect and the industrial aspect as well. She right now is working on immune stimulating antibody conjugates. So that's like the little picture on the right. And that is where you're trying to use antibodies to bring a specific target, which would be for the immune system, to these different types of different types of immune cells, and then stimulate them to attack a cancer cell. So they kind of call like turning, I believe it was turning a cold tumor to a hot tumor, and you know, using your own body to attack the cancer itself. So she's working on these antibody treatments, and I guess, you know, we'll see how that research is going, since it's quite new for the field in Bolt Therapeutics. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, that one. So when she was at Genentech, she actually was heavily involved in helping with this clinical trial for the implementation of this drug called Herceptin as a cancer therapeutic. So I just pulled this off Genentech's website. Herceptin is a monoclonal antibody. It helps to counteract a genetic mutation of the HER2 gene that I mentioned, that she had worked on in the past. So it's great that they were able to find her to work on this. Now, when it's combined with chemotherapy, there was more than 50% reduction in the recurrence of this breast cancer in the patients who had undergone surgery for the condition, and then it also had improved their survival by over a third. So the way that the HER2 receptor works is just a very little cartoon diagram in the bottom, is that there's this HER2 receptor on the outside of a tumor, and it's helpful for the tumor to grow. It will recruit growth factors and then internalize those to the cell membrane. Those growth factors can be recognized and metabolized, and then signal the cell to keep growing. So we do not want that, of course, for when cancer is ongoing. So Herceptin is kind of like antagonist to the HER2 receptor. So you can think of it as like a socket and a plug. So when Herceptin will bind to the HER2 receptor, it's not going to be able to pull in those growth factors anymore. So the tumor cell won't be able to have that signal to grow faster, or to even potentially grow at all. So she had used this, so she had shown that this had some great success in breast cancer in the clinical trials, but Genentech, it's unclear why. There could be several reasons based on being a minority or woman, that she didn't get as much credit for being involved in these clinical trials as she was. She had designed a massive cohort. I can't remember the number of women that had been enrolled, but she had also then analyzed the data and found that she had analyzed additional data, and found that this drug therapy also reduced stomach and esophageal cancers where there had been metastasis. So I'm not sure if that's actually like the origin for that cancer, if it's still like, the breast cancer tissue itself, but she had found this unique finding. But Genentech had, published this work and had pursued this work without giving her that credit, which is most likely one of the reasons why she would have left, I would assume. If you're not getting appreciation by your company, especially for making a great finding in your specialized field, that she had been a HER2 receptor expert, you want that appreciation validated. So now, she's working on her antibody therapies at the new company. So hopefully that will be successful for the clinical trial she's going to design there. And you can go to the next slide. And this is just a fun fact, and I know that Professor Weiss will appreciate this, but she is also a very adamant runner. So she always says, like in some interviews, that when she's not running her brain, she's running on her feet. So she has partaked in like several marathons in the past, and she still does this. As of the article, I think it was like 2016 was the most recent one I could find. So I'm not sure if she's still running marathons to this day, but she definitely has been in the past few years. And then she actually organized one starting in 2013. It didn't run this year, of course, but it's a annual marathon that takes place in Jacksonville, and all the proceeds go for pro bono surgeries and treatment for women at the Mayo Clinic who may have breast cancer. So it's specific for that cause, but it seems that it brings in a lot of people to the area, and she seems to enjoy it as well. So I thought that would be fun to share with CRC, since we also have the annual run walk to raise money for. Yeah, so that's all I have for her. Yeah.